The Fanfiction Where Randy Gets Put on Death Row by hatsunoid and ollie bandtrees. Summary. After being utterly humiliated in front of his beautiful green lover during a subway mugging, Randy Jade decides to finally take his life into his own hands. Unfortunately, his plans to do so are doomed to go wrong in ways nobody could have ever predicted, least of all Randy. Welcome one and all to the fanfiction where Randy gets put on death row. Warning! This fic contains frequent in-depth descriptions of death, gore, drug use, and unhealthy relationships. Do with that information what you will. Chapter 1. The story of how Randy Jade did his best. Phone Ginky dared not to move underneath the setting sun. The wind was harsh, stinging against their naked body, but they sat there, motionless, all the same. It was February, the tail end of winter. You'd think being the month of love would pardon it from everything ugly about the season, but of course, it doesn't work that way. No matter who you spend your time with, the sky will always be dull and gray, the ground covered in the snow's sludgy leftovers. It felt hostile, as if the month didn't want anyone around, or that it didn't want to exist in the first place, but had an obligation to as the transition point between winter and spring. Important, but pleasant nonetheless. Ginky tapped long fingernails against the concrete they were sitting on. The faint tip-tap did little to fill the dead air with any noise. The ground was damp. Damp with what, exactly, was unclear. Perhaps residue from some melted snow? Maybe some kind of rancid liquid that had seeped out from the trash? Most likely, it was a combination of both. In front of them, on top of the dumpster's closed lid, stood a lanky figure. Ginky wondered if it'd be able to keep itself upright for long on such thin, shaky legs. Surely the wind would push it over soon, or perhaps it'd simply collapse under its own weight. Thinking about it was funny in its own way, the same way knocking over a kid's stack of building blocks or watching old people slip on ice was funny. They wanted to laugh, wanted it to fall over, not out of a sense of cruelty. That's just how it's supposed to be. But, to their surprise, no matter how much it seemed to tremble, it never did. For a moment it was admirable, until Ginky remembered who they were looking at. Randy fidgeted, shifting around like he wasn't used to such undivided attention. He picked at his nails, occasionally nicking his cuticles. Thank you for being here. He only received the wind's harsh whistle as a reply. Ginky stayed uncharacteristically silent. Before anything else, I just want to say, I don't regret it. Any of it. Randy said, pausing for a minute after, expecting an interjection. None came. Disappointed, he turned his gaze to the sordid ground, littered with various discarded old wrappers and shattered glass bottles. Nothing either of them wasn't used to. It wasn't good, and I don't expect you to support what I did. A deep breath. I want you to try and understand, okay? If it wasn't me, it would have just been someone else. I was just unlucky. That's all. The city lights flickered on as the sun retreated further into the horizon, shining a spotlight on Randy's confession. Ginky sat there as judge, jury, and executioner. Maybe that was dramatic. The streets shined and the ambience faded, not for any kind of trial, but a bad middle school play the world made sure not to interrupt, not wanting to miss a single cringe-worthy detail. Randy didn't take to the stage with grace. Even in the winter, his hands were sweaty. He looked everywhere that wasn't his audience, the ground, his feet, up at the darkening sky. Everyone at the show, both attendees and actors, knew they were in for a night of complete and utter humiliation. He could only swallow, any protest dying in his throat. There was no running from confession. He knew that. So for once in his life, Randy Jade stood with dignity, even as the world sat back and laughed, and took a bow. Though for all his theatrics, the only thing he could focus on were bandaged hands, soaked in more blood than usual. Something heavy, Dangerous. Something that could crush metal. That was all Randy needed. The life of violence and destruction was something completely alien to him, at least when it came to being the harbinger of such things. He was something of an expert when it came to being on the receiving end. He shuddered. That was the old Randy. The new Randy wouldn't tolerate being the world's butt monkey anymore. Once he was rid of his curse, he'd never have to deal with swans, or being mugged, pissing himself in public, or the mortifying thought of dying alone at the bottom of a dumpster ever again. Victory against life would be sweet, a sweetness he'd never grow tired of, like a kid in 2012 experiencing the first spoonful of Nutella. His heart beat so violently in his chest, it felt like his ribcage would shatter. There was a giddiness to it all, a mischievous excitement Randy hadn't felt probably ever. Even as he tried to be quiet, traversing through the city in the dead of night, there was a noticeable pep in his step. Eventually, he reached a dumpster, hidden in the back of a large hardware store, the kind he'd never actually get to shop at. Not like he had a house to start a doomed DIY deck project for anyway. It had the same general look of his dumpster, but none of the same smells. It wasn't pleasant by any stretch of the word, but it wasn't unbearable either. Lacked the distinct greasy heaviness that made other dumpsters uniquely disgusting. Randy didn't feel anything but excitement as he opened the lid, hoping to find anything to aid him in his Madam Mediocre assassination plot. However, he soon realized with it being in the middle of the night and all, he couldn't actually see anything. Not without a flashlight, and people tended not to throw those away. At least not when they still worked. He silently cursed to himself. He didn't want to go in and feel around. Even if it was a relatively clean dumpster, it was still a dumpster. Randy living in a dumpster of his own didn't change this fact. Things don't stop being disgusting unless they're familiar. Cleaning your own dirty bathroom is whatever, but cleaning someone else's? That's entirely different. Still, he wasn't about to let one icky setback ruin his plan. He'd climb in a million dumpsters if it meant escaping his misfortune. He'd done grosser. Finding a point of entry was tricky. Here lacked the moist trash slope that made getting into his own dumpster easier. There wasn't anything outside he could prop up as a climbing point either. He'd have to climb in using nothing but his own upper body strength, of which he had very little. Randy had been so caught up in his excitement and subsequent struggle, he almost missed the sound of dress shoes click-clack-clacking against the concrete. Randy turned his head. What kind of freak is out this late at night? The eager thumping of his chest all at once turned anxious. This wasn't in the plan. The rational part of Randy's brain told him that whoever was there probably wasn't a threat to him. At worst, if it was anyone with authority, which, to be fair, was most people if you're Randy, they'd just look at him funny and tell him to fuck off out of the trash. And normally he'd be content to scurry off into the ether when yelled at, find another dumpster to forage for weapons. But that was the old Randy. If you poured soup in my lap, I'd probably apologize to you, Randy. The Randy who'd always grin and bear it, because he was too weak to do anything else. This was the new Randy, and the new Randy wasn't going to take any nonsense from anybody. He was going to show the whole world who he was. He was gonna fall face first into the dumpster, apparently. He slipped with a loud thud, his head hitting something in the landing. It was far too dark to see anything still, though if he had to guess, it might have been a cinder block of some sort. Ow. He took a bandaged hand to his face. Nothing felt like it had been knocked out, so he optimistically chose to believe none of the shattered glass stabbing him came from his own screen. Though with that came the unfortunate realization that whoever was approaching definitely heard him crashing into the trash. But maybe it wasn't so bad. Randy didn't actually see anyone approaching. Perhaps in his nervousness he mistook the sounds of an approaching raccoon as a human being. Not that that was really any better. Might have been worse, actually. Raccoons loved biting and grabbing things with their human hands. And having rabies. 3 of the worst qualities a wild animal could have. The only thing that would make it worse was, well, Look what we got in here! A familiar voice called, dragging Randy out of his raccoon thoughts. If it ain't the little cuckold from the subway! He peered up from the bottom of the trash heap. The man's figure was shadowed in the dark. The only part he could make out was the sheen of a pointed metal head. A knife. You... Randy murmured, his prey animal instincts returning to him all at once. This wasn't in the plan. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Didn't expect to see a Class A weenie like you here in my weapon dumpster, the man continued, looking at Randy as if he were a cockroach he found scuttling around on his floor. I'm not a weenie, Randy lied. And this isn't your weapon dumpster. It's the community's. The protest sounded weak in his throat. The loud, pointless yapping of a small, quivering chihuahua. Randy knew that was how the world saw him. It was how he saw himself, after all. It seemed like no amount of struggling would free Randy from the bottom of the food chain. His newly found, I just pissed myself in front of my partner after being mugged and I have nothing to lose, bravado, started to fade, just as fast as it was born. A pit formed in his stomach. If a guy could mug him with an unloaded gun, then kick him out of a dumpster, then was there anyone who couldn't push him around? It's where I got my gun, so it's my weapons dumpster, yeah. You's got a problem with that? The mugger said. His faux Brooklyn accent made Randy's non-existent eyes roll into the back of his skull. Your gun without bullets, you mean? Oh, you've got an attitude now, don't ya? The man gripped the rim of the dumpster. Randy scooted away from him, back hitting the wall with a loud clatter. He winced at the pain. He wasn't sure which part of his body to focus on. His head throbbed. Tiny shards of glass had embedded themselves in so many places he couldn't feel them all. Randy felt his plan for a better life rapidly slipping through his grimy, pale fingers. Was there anyone or anything in Dialtown that didn't have it out for him? The mugger continued blathering on about something Randy couldn't make out. All he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat and a sharp ringing in his head, fighting each other for his attention. Acidic heat burned its way up his chest and into his throat. You ought to skedaddle on out of here before I make ya with my fists and or gun! He's talking. He's still talking. Why won't he shut up already? He just keeps going and going and going, and suddenly Randy was back on the stupid subway, humiliating himself while everyone else sat back and watched. He could hear that floozy making moves on his partner like he was fucking invisible. He heard the rumble of the subway, the honking of bloodthirsty pond avians, the ringing of his own head with some loser on the other line asking if he's feeling randy tonight. He heard the snap of a marker cap, the beep of hospital machines, the cracking of his own skull. Oh, phone god, his head was going to explode soon, wasn't it? He hit it pretty hard on the way down. It'd detonate any minute. Maybe the bandage would come loose, or another part of head got bashed in so hard it knocked his overstuffed insides around. He'd die alone in a random dumpster, and no one would care. No one would find him, and he'd have to spend his last moments alive, listening to this bastard! You okay, dude? The mugger deflated, waving his gun about in gesture. This was kind of fun at first, but you haven't moved in a few minutes. It's just kind of sad now. Can you even hear me? At some point, Randy's hand, sore as it was, trailed to his side. His fingers met a wooden base. He slowly grasped onto it, noting its weight. A tool of some kind. He didn't know what it was exactly, but that didn't matter to him. A small part of him screamed to just leave. It's never worth it. You're just going to make your life worse. Stop, just stop already. Hey, what are you? Those were the last words Randy's mugger ever spoke. Without thinking, Randy had thrown the object in his hand as hard as he could. Turned out it was a hammer, which even when thrown at Randy's strength could do some serious damage, with a bit of luck. The head connected in the dead center of the knife's blade, the resulting dent so severe his head snapped in half like a twig in an instant. It felt anticlimactic, in a sick sense of the word. There wasn't any more noise after that, not even a cry of pain. For a few moments, before he realized what he'd done, Randy Jade was safe. I didn't mean to kill him. That's never what I wanted at all. But if it meant getting out of there in one piece, then... Hold on. You killed somebody? Gingy interjected. Since when? Since around 2 nights ago? That's kind of what the whole story was about. Randy fidgeted in his spot before coming to a frustrating conclusion. You weren't listening to me, were you? I heard like half of it before I saw a really cool frog on the ground, they confessed. Randy wanted to feel insulted, but as his gaze trailed to the ground, he noticed the frog in question. And damn, it was pretty cool. If he had to choose between listen to Randy J talk and frog, he'd choose the frog too. What do you think this little guy's doing out here? Oh, no, wait. What do you think this little guy's doing out here in the cold anyway? Shouldn't he be encased in ice somewhere in a pond? Randy thought about it for a moment. Well, I mean, it was kind of warm last week. Maybe all the frogs got up for spring too early because they got confused? Maybe, Gingy responded, before quickly devouring the creature. In a display so fast yet so horrific, Randy's small human brain couldn't begin to process it. I'm hungry, Randy. Survival of the fittest. The frog should have known its place. Randy tried to think of a retort, but nothing satisfactory came to mind. Okay, then. That's fair, I guess. Gingy scratched their head, with a squishy noise upon their nails' contact with the overstuffed stitches. So why'd you bring me out here anyway? If you wanted to have a sleepover, my tent's way nicer than this. No, your tent's not way nicer. Look, the point is I accidentally killed a man and I need your help, okay? Gingy couldn't help but laugh, because really, wasn't the mental image of Randy Jade killing someone just the darndest thing? Yeah, right. I'll believe it when I see it, pal. They expected him to whine back about how, no, really, I totally did, or whatever. But Randy just tugged the hem of his shirt, lost in thought. Well, I can show you, if you want, Randy muttered, his fingers twitchy. But you have to promise to never tell anyone about this. Ever! Gingy nodded in agreement, but Randy could tell their heart wasn't really in it. He sighed, putting a hand to his temple. I mean it, Phone Gingy, he stated firmly. Oh, Phone God, if any of this got out, they'd lock me up in prison. Forever! And we both know I wouldn't last a single day in forever prison. All the seasoned alpha men would make Randy soup out of me. Personally, Gingy thought the mental image of Randy Soup was kind of hilarious, but they understood somewhere in their frog brain that the situation was at least vaguely serious. Okay, I'm not gonna tell anybody. Don't get your panties in a twist. Jeez. A strange flushed noise left Randy's throat. My panties are not twisted, he huffed, in a way only a man with egregiously twisted panties would have, which made Gingy giggle. Even if Randy was all sad and pathetic and junk, he was fun to mess around with. They supposed whatever affection they had towards him wasn't dissimilar to the way one might feel about a particularly sickly old family pet. A dog who can't really do anything but trudge along the house aimlessly, occasionally pissing on the floor. Gross in a way you can't really get mad at. Randy shimmied his way down from the dumpster, narrowly avoiding falling. It might have been better if he had slipped and fell on his ass. More familiar. Randy needed to be knocked around some, otherwise they weren't right in the head. This was a known law of the universe. But alas, his feet, and only his feet, made contact with the concrete ground. Look, if you're serious about keeping it a secret, then I could show you, Randy conceded. His tone was oddly pleasant given the circumstances, but Geeky couldn't place a specific emotion behind it. I'll trust you. The words felt heavy in a way Gingy didn't understand. Obviously, they refused to believe anything about Randy being involved in any kind of murder-blood incident, accidental or not, just on principle. but a sinking feeling in their stomach formed. If Randy didn't kill a man, then what actually happened? They trotted closer to the dumpster, getting a better look at Randy up close. He was noticeably sweatier than usual, which they didn't know was even possible. He also smelled... Bad was a nice way of putting it. Kinky assumed Randy always smelled bad, but they never noticed it before, being far too resilient to the odors of the world. But whatever stench radiated off him was making their little green head hurt. Randy! Gigi started, but was quickly interrupted by the loud thud of the dumpster lid hitting the back wall. The words died in their throat. Whatever horrible smell radiated from Randy grew more intense. What the fuck was in that dumpster? They instinctively covered their face, clutching where a nose would have been. Rotary Christ! I know. Randy, I feel like I'm about to start vomiting blood! Oh, well, don't do that. Randy looked more grossed out at the thought than concerned over his partner's well-being, though Geeky had no idea why. Surely projectile vomiting gelatinous blue blood all over the place would be infinitely more sanitary than whatever was already happening. Randy. Geeky ignored him. Randy, what the fuck even is that? They couldn't make out anything past the very top layer of trash, though, to be honest, they weren't sure they actually wanted to see the bottom. I'm getting to that, hon. Randy threw a gangly leg into the dumpster's opening, beckoning Ginky to join him. It'll all make sense in here. Ginky looked back at him like he'd just wordlessly started smoking crack in the middle of the street. Are you serious? Can't you just bring it out here or something? They really didn't want to crawl into Randy's trash house. Even ignoring the smell, it was just so depressing in there. Randy frantically shook his head at the suggestion, deeply frightened. Nuh-uh. No way, Jose. If anyone finds out about this, I'd be ruined. I already told you Well, Ginky interjected, to be fair, you did just confess to murder out in the open. Would it make a big difference? Randy cringed. Even if you couldn't see it on his face, his shoulders tensed and his fingers tightened against the dumpster rim. You said you didn't believe me. I don't. You're a man made of soggy, wet tissue paper. But if I or anyone else did, it would look bad, they reiterated. Randy tried stuttering out a defense, but it came out no more intelligible than the whimpers of a kicked puppy. Annoying. Ginky contemplated leaving. It wasn't like Randy would actually do anything about it, if they did, besides whine and grovel for them to come back. And maybe a mean part of their brain liked that mental image more than they cared to admit. But, man, the reality of dealing with that for more than a minute sounded genuinely, actually torturous. They sighed. Even the ever-stubborn and obnoxious Von Ginky had to admit defeat every now and then. Fine. I'll go in your stupid dumpster. But it better be serious for realsies, or I'll be so mad, they pouted. Randy nodded, anxiously climbing inside. It's 100% for realies. I pinky promise. Gigi couldn't see, but they knew he was doing the stupid happy little thumbs up pose from inside the garbage. Unbelievable. Why they put up with him at all was a mystery never to be solved. They simply sighed once more before scampering inside, though the regret of entering hit immediately, as did the smell. It was almost familiar. Genki certainly wasn't a stranger to garbage, rot, or anything else similarly edgy and unpleasant, but there was something unmistakably off. The air was too rich, too sticky, too thick, with the stench of overripe fruit and well water. What was that? What the fuck was that? Sorry, it's, Randy trailed off, interrupted by the loud squelch of Gigi lifting their foot from a puddle of mysterious, thick liquid. They looked back at him, confused in an uncomfortable sort of way. Their gaze started around, in search of something visually obvious, something that would make everything magically make sense. The answer came in the form of a hand, discarded on the ground, swollen and pale. It laid there, palm up, fingers curled in, like the legs of a dead spider. Kiki half expected it to get up and start moving, skittering around on puffy purple digits like a loose rat. But no matter how hard they stared, it was as still as the moment they first saw it. They swallowed hard. Randy blathered on about something, talking himself in circles trying to explain, but they couldn't be bothered to listen to a word of it. His voice only served as obnoxious white noise. The hand sat in a pile of coagulated maroon substance. Blood, probably. The same blood that coated the dumpster floor like the world's wettest, clumpiest carpet. Absent-mindedly, they shuffled forward, as if in a trance, trying to follow the liquid to its source. Surely there was more. There had to be more. They had to know what they were looking at. They set their sights on a particularly dubious pile of trash. Various different newspapers and food wrappers sat poorly stacked on one another, a mound that would crumble in on itself at the slightest of movements. Despite the poor efforts made to conceal it, Giki could clearly see a limbless, human torso peeking out from beneath some used, mustardy napkins. Dude! The words barely managed to leave their throat. Randy could only retreat further into himself, nervously putting his fingers where his mouth would have been had he had one, like the evolutionary instinct to bite his nails hadn't left, despite the physical impossibility. It's not as bad as it looks, really. Randy! Kiki's voice boomed in the closed space. Randy, there's a dead body! Yeah, I guess there is. He rubbed the back of his neck, turning away from Ginky like they were an angry parent scolding him about a bad report card. But hey, at least you know I wasn't lying. Randy, where are his limbs? What did you do? Randy sighed. He supposed Ginky's reaction had made sense. People tend not to like it when their boyfriends show them corpses. That was only endearing when cats did it. Well, look, it's not like I could hide a whole entire body on my own. He rubbed his neck harder, like if he managed to rub it raw, the situation would feel less awkward. I had to cut it up into little bits. Makes it easier to get rid of, you know? Randy's voice wobbled. Kiki wasn't entirely convinced he believed his own justifications. No, Randy, I don't know. This is deplorable even for you, they huffed, bending down to examine the body further, poking at one of the disgusting little arm stumps. What do you mean, even for me? This is completely unprecedented. Randy looked down at his lover, watching them poke and prod at his handiwork. His hands twisted themselves in knots, fidgeting at the hem of his jacket. Kiki couldn't combine the image of the Randy in front of them with the one who sliced and diced people like butcher shop ham. It just didn't compute. I don't like anything about this either, you know. I don't think I'm going to be able to eat meat again for as long as I live. Randy gagged just thinking about trying to enjoy any of the staple meaty delights. God forbid he ever got a hamburger or a weenie. He'd probably spend the whole time thinking about it oozing coagulated blood slime. Yucky. Oh, well that sucks for you, Ginky replied curtly. Nothing could ever make me stop enjoying the taste of flesh. Yeah, I figured nothing could ever separate you from your horse jerky. Randy didn't understand Von Ginky's affinity for the stuff, and figured it was none of his business. A question of cosmic scale you're not really supposed to think too hard about. But that's great news, actually, because I need your help getting rid of all this. What, me? Ginky asked, incredulous. Randy, I don't know what fumes you've been huffing, aside from my cultivated aromas, but I am not getting involved in your whatever this is. Hon, Randy whimpered like a kicked baby puppy with puppy typhus. I can't do this alone. I told you everything because I thought I could trust you. A pause.
Also, I think you're already involved by technicality. Funkiki groaned really loudly, like a teenager asked to clean their room. Fine, but only this one time. I'm not doing this again if you kill another guy. Randy huffed, clearly offended. I'm not gonna kill another guy. You know I don't have that in me. Well, I didn't think you had killing any amount of guys in you, but you learn something new every fucking day, I guess. I'm so sorry, please don't yell at me. Randy shrank back like a sad little shrimp. Gigi groaned. Randy was impossible to talk to sometimes. So what do you want me to do about him? They pointed at the corpse, which had accumulated a few flies over the course of the conversation, showing that it smelled bad and like shit. Well, you eat roadkill, right? I don't think this would be very different. There was a long pause, the dumpster filled with nothing but the sound of the aforementioned flies. Randy grew nervous. Are you thinking about it? No, I am not thinking about it, they lied. I have standards, Randall. Another lie so egregious even Randy noticed it. Do you actually? Kiki stood up from next to the corpse and bapped Randy on the head in retaliation. Irrelevant! Such a gesture would normally be playful and light-hearted, and indeed that's how Kiki intended it, but they often forgot their boyfriend had a pipe bomb for a head. Randy, on the other hand, almost never forgot this fact, considering it was pretty darn important to his day-to-day living. He recoiled in fear, clutching his head with the same frightened gentleness one might hold a vase, or perhaps an egg. Please don't do that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I won't make you eat a dead body. No, please, don't hurt me. Kiki didn't mean to bully him. Not in that instance, anyways. But they got a weird sense of comfort knowing Randy was still the same skittish shrew of a person they knew. So they supposed it didn't matter how many crimes against humanity he committed, and they could still knock him around like a beach ball. So long as Randy kept on being Randy, things would probably be fine. I guess, Randy muttered, thinking out loud to himself, still uneasily rubbing his head. I guess we could always hide the pieces in different trash bags. That wouldn't be too obvious, would it? He turned to Kinky for advice, but they had their attention focused on one of the flies, attempting to catch one on their long, disgusting tongue like a frog. Randy groaned, exasperated, but not particularly surprised. He simply leaned down to pick up the torso to the best of his ability, scouting for a trash bag to shove it into. Randy! Phone Geeky loudly shouting his name made Randy jump, dropping the torso in the process. It landed in one of the blood puddles with a loud, dramatic splat. Gross. Whoa. Randy, why doesn't that man have a head? Well, he didn't need it anymore. Randy pointed to one of the various trash piles. The pieces of his head should be in one of those bags. I didn't really know what to do with it. Pieces? Kiki looked at the pile and then back at Randy. I accidentally snapped his head in two with a hammer, remember? Huh. I didn't know that was possible, Gigi mused. I didn't either. I'm still not sure it is. I don't know how that happened. Just bad luck, I guess. Or good luck, depending how you look at it, they interjected. Didn't you hate this guy? Randy thought about it for a moment. Well, yeah, but I didn't want him dead about it. He did think about that guy dying various times in the short time he knew him, but wistfully wishing for something was very different than actively wanting it. At least if you asked Randy. Besides, you've been yelling at me about this pretty consistently. I'm very confused about if you're for or against murder. Ha! Yeah. I'm just gonna finish putting this guy in trash bags, okay? Randy said, picking the torso back up. Okay. What do you need me for then? Gigi asked, like they were being tasked to help set up a fun little party. You You get to help me carry some of these bags to other dumpsters. It'd be far too heavy for little old Randy, I'm afraid. Other dumpsters? Well, yeah. If we leave 'em all in this one, and then an arm gets discovered, that'd be way too much evidence in one place. Plus, this is kinda sorta my house and all. I don't want corpse stench in here any longer than necessary. I think the corpse stench is burned in at this point, but I see what you mean. Kiki sat there for a moment before a thought entered their green little noggin, an admittedly rare occurrence. Randy, they cocked their head. What are you going to do about all this highly suspicious blood? The blood? Randy paused, somehow failing to consider this. Oh. Oh, God, Well, I guess you do have the possum, Kiki stated, as if the implication were clear as day. Huh? Well, possums love blood, so it'll probably just drink all of it up once we leave, they reiterated, completely confident. I don't, Randy stammered, cramming the torso in a bag in a manner one might shove one last shirt into an overstuffed suitcase. Giggy, honey, darling, Angel, I'm not sure that's true. Of course it is. That's like possum fact number one. It's not. It's possum fact number one, Randy. Now let's stop worrying about it and go home. Okay. Yeah, we could do that. Wait. Home? Yeah, my tent, obviously. We can go there and, like, touch tips or something. Gigi suggested casually. Oh, wow. Really? Randy beamed, far too excited for someone holding several corpse bags. I don't see why not. I'm gonna cum my pants and fall asleep immediately to go to bed tonight anyways. Might as well do it as a team, they replied, taking one of the trash bags from him. Hot dog! Oh, Gigi, you're the best! He cheered before the two of them headed off into the city, sure to have a night filled with trash, rolling around in various cleansing puddles, and maybe even mediocre sex. What a time to be alive! Chapter 2. No life should be wasted. Gigi stared blankly at the ceiling of their tent, gently tossing a hacky sack in between their hands. They didn't take Randy to be the type to sleep in this long. Usually nervous prey animals slept in short bursts, never allowing themselves to get too comfortable. It just wasn't safe out there for the Randys of the world. One moment spent with his guard down could mean certain embarrassing inconvenience and or death. Which, for Randy's, the two were one and the same. But at that moment, he looked so peaceful, like one of those aesthetically pleasing, sleepy baby deer pictures, where they're curled up under a big leaf. Never mind the way he was sprawled out like a starfish, one sock still hanging off the tips of his toes like a snake shedding its skin. They wanted to reach out, give the side of his head an affectionate stroke. That's what people in love do, right? After they open joint bank accounts, they hold each other and bonk their heads together. All that good stuff. Though Gigi supposed bonking heads with Randy specifically wasn't the best idea. But they could do other stuff. Once Randy got up, they could snuggle places besides the crate. Like a burglar hovel, or the movie theater bathroom. The world was their homosexual oyster. Plus, the more often they snuggled, the more stable their relationship would become. And stable relationships were good for raising children. Kiki remembered that advice from the 5.5 minutes they spent at a parenting class for newly expecting mothers, before they got bored, sprayed, ate a chair, along with some poor woman's wallet, and scampered off before anyone could process what they had just witnessed. Good times those were. You cannot be serious, a voice in their head chimed, tone extremely displeased. What? You're not seriously considering an actual future with Randy, are you? The narrator asked, like it was the most ridiculous idea they'd ever heard. Kiki shrugged. What's wrong with that? I thought you wanted me to settle down to raise my beautiful green babies. He killed a man, Phone Gingy! Ha ha! Yeah, good times. They smiled, reminiscing on their little rendezvous. Oh, what a magical night it was trying to locate every dumpster in Dial Town. It was a lot harder than you'd think. Like Where's Walter or whatever those books were called. Phone Gigi, I implore you to take this seriously. Also, hey, wait. Since when do you care about settling down? That's not like you at all. They thought about it for a moment. Well, I don't. It's just, look, the man has his issues, but he can touch a good tip, okay? What do you want me to say? A deep sigh. Unbelievable. It changes a man, narrator. It changes a man! Maybe I had too much faith in you, the voice groaned. Like, in retrospect, you assisting in cold-blooded murder shouldn't surprise me as much as it does. But I always considered you more the type for, I don't know, petty vandalism, squirting your weird green nipple juice on things. Not... With non-existent hands, Kiki could imagine the narrator gesturing out incredulously. I mean, Guy probably had a family. You could have just let this be another bullet point in the million-word scroll on why Randy James or whatever his name is, his life sucks. You didn't need to get your green hands all up in his business. Do you really care that much about what happens to him? The narrator was, surely, surprised to see Von Kiki stop and give anything any amount of thought. Truth be told, the gears didn't turn easily in their weird green brain. Several times they were tempted to throw in the towel and redirect their focus to the little cockroach skittering through their tent. He kinda made me do it, though, through, emotional manipulations and stuff. For a bit he talked about making me eat it, which... Man, thinking was hard, and the narrator was silent, like they were waiting for a second grader to figure out the next step in their multiplication tables. Felt kinda gross. But hey, blood slime under the bridge, am I right? He said he wouldn't do it again, and, to be honest, I don't think he has the upper body strength to kill more than one guy. Even that one was just another one of Phone God's weird little miracles. Stretching their arms above their head, they flopped back over a conveniently placed soft piece of trash. I don't really feel like falling down a path of evil. I'm freaking pregnant, man. They were not, in fact, freaking pregnant. Whistling a sigh through their non-existent teeth, the narrator seemed pleased with that, if nothing else. As much as you deserve it sometimes, I don't want you in prison. Psh! Prison? Gigi snickered. You think any bars are strong enough to hold this cryptid? They stuck out two thumbs towards themselves, though the narrator's silence told them all they needed to. Historically, yes. And real prisons don't have sexy giraffes in them. Oof. All the more reason to not kill any more guys or whatever. Randall over there's just going through a phase. It happens. But it'll all be okie dokie. Besides, that dude was rolling a hand, they sputtered for a bit. Fart noises with their mouth as they looked for the right words. A total bit character. Minor antagonist at most. Who the heck miss a guy like that, anyway? It felt like the sun would never rise again. Shooty couldn't believe what he'd heard. Things like that just didn't happen in Dial Town. Sure, they were members of the town's mob, but most of their bustling about amounted to little more than scaring sad sacks like Randy Jade out of their wallets, and even that worked to only dubious amounts of success, and deterring old ladies from crossing the street. Their weapon heads were for show. Phone God knew they could have never fired the real things. Now, he felt sick at the thought. Sick as he was sure someone who'd just been to a slaughterhouse felt, seeing a funfair weenie. He'd wanted all of it to be some horrible joke, some especially cruel jab from Mayor Bingus getting on one or both of them for spending the mob's dubious drug taxes on aforementioned funfair weenies and those toy rubber hands you get at the book fair. But no, the inhumanity of it all was even beyond her. Her ears flat, fur prickling, as she pulled the crime scene photos from their manila folder. Stabby tore his gaze away, but the vague shapes, colors, shadows on the front were all he needed to see. That, and the number of them. One slipped between her fingers.
His mob partner of ambiguous relationship had been found in pieces, shoved in trash bags, crammed around parts of the city like a grotesque scavenger hunt. Not much evidence, that aside, remained. One of the trash bags hadn't even been recovered. Bits of his head, his torso, limbs, then bits of them chopped up even smaller. It was barbaric. A kind of cruelty even the mob thought no citizen of Dialtown capable of. A kind of cruelty that made even Mayor Mingus tuck away the folder, swear, and pour another round of ambiguous alcohol into her milk saucer. What was he going to do at the funeral? What could he even say? What was Shooty without Stabby? A hollowed out, raggedly torn, forever incomplete half? A once two-man comedy group? A bitless bit character? He turned around the mirrors in his apartment, sick of looking at himself, sick of his phone ringing from its spot in his discarded suit jacket, sick of the condolences, sick of the people who couldn't grasp what to say to him and never thought they'd have to try. But he had an obligation too, as Shooty's other half. No one knew just how dim the world had gotten without him. It was his job then to speak, to take that senseless murder and make it mean anything. He was the only one who thought to speak, beyond Mingus's likely AI-generated speech that concluded in her urging Shooty's meager amount of loved ones to vote for her at the next election, to honor his memory, to pay it forward to the boss who gave him the job he loved so much he'd die for it. He couldn't be mad at her, couldn't be mad at any of them. Sometimes it's all so absurd, so horrible, that all you can do is laugh. Laugh at the forever closed casket. Laugh at the unsolved murder. Laugh at the Stabby without his Shooty. No one in attendance said a thing as Shooty took to the podium, in a dark coat from his bro's closet, gun head polished black, minus the bright orange plastic tip to symbolize his disavowment of violence moving forward. But he knew, deep down, they were laughing. They knew how to do nothing else. Hey, so is it like, Gingy began, voice far too loud for a funeral, wearing black nipple tassels and a long dark veil for the occasion, frowned upon to go to the funeral of the guy you killed? Randy heaved, head dipped low, a bandaged hand grasping for Gingy's shoulder to shut them up. The gun-headed one was speaking, after all. It's the least I could do, I guess. It felt right. Besides, you can't judge me when... He sniffed, tugging on the collar of a black jacket he was wearing, over his other jacket, of course. This cost me like $15 at Party City. I didn't think you could afford such a luxury. I can't. I found it in the trash and immediately lost $15 at Party City in an unrelated incident. No, I mean, I can't believe you had $15 to lose. That's like homeowner money. Randy thought about recanting the calls from Clown Town he got early on into the hotline job, but decided reliving the memory would be traumatizing in a way he didn't want himself nor the other patrons of the funeral to experience. They paid decent money, but at a grave cost. He shivered. Maybe in a few years, assuming he wouldn't be dead, Randy could consider telling a therapist about the hours upon hours of erotic clown roleplay he bore witness to. But that was neither here nor there. There was also a bone-deep fear he'd had, for the entire length of his hotline job, that he'd bump into his clients in increasingly absurd places. Nights passed where he had to talk himself down from panic attacks built on the assumption that one day, if he, or anybody he cared about, were to ever give birth, one of those goddamn motherfucking erotic cowboys would be the midwife, and it'd be really awkward and... You realize you're talking out loud about the cowboys thing, right? Giggy asked, chipper. A woman standing near the pair turned her head to look at them disapprovingly. Randy didn't know if she heard their conversation or if she was just appalled by Giggy's choice in clothing. Neither would surprise him. He simply gripped his complimentary funeral punch tighter, cherry red liquid threatening to spill over the edge. Up on the podium, completely oblivious to any thoughts of clowns or the ever-elusive Party City, a broken man wept. Was it stabby or shooty? Von Gigi couldn't remember. And to be honest, they didn't think anyone else did either. The knife-headed one, the tombstone read. Last time they looked at it. Ode to Randy muttering it aloud. Who was to say? Damn, they probably should have paid closer attention to the speech in that case. What was he saying again? I'll always remember about... Loudly, the man sniffed, taking a handkerchief to the barrel of his gun head. Behind all the mob headlines. Dialtown has a mob? Genki asked. If he had eyes, Randy would have blinked at that, wringing his hands. Did you think those guys went around with suits and guns talking like that for fun? All the stuff in the news. My bro, he was... Paul always said he was the sharpest guy around. Little mob joke. You know how we have those. One of the ladies he robbed before meeting his untimely end, she's in the crowd with us. We got in touch with her through the police investigation, and she said... Stabby stuck out a hand towards a woman standing closer to the center. Go right ahead. A lady so elderly she was more wrinkled than skin, with a severely rusted typewriter for a head, you know, 'cause she's old, the narrator added, nodded. That bladed fellow there! No one's ever lit up a room while stealing my wallet quite like he has. This turnout kinda sucks, Ginky mumbled, through blowing bubbles in their funeral punch with some unseen facial orifice. I miss my eggs. Randy turned his head, happy to look away from the podium again. Stops all the all-consuming guilt from settling in or whatever. I know you do, honey bunches. I know you do. Huh. Gigi poked their head up from their punch. Since when do you call me that? Well, I don't know. Since right now, I guess. I just wanted to try something new. His voice wavered. Was his experimentation with pet names cringe? Do you not like it? They mulled it over a while. Answering Randy's questions proved to be infinitely more entertaining than watching strangers awkwardly recount stories, trying to sound sadder than they actually were. Even if the funeral goers did feel bad, they didn't feel as though they felt bad enough. Truly a dilemma Gigi didn't care to ponder. Well, I don't know. It could grow on me, winky face. Makes me feel like you're my wife greeting me after I get home from a long day at my non-specific guy with a wife and kids at home job, you know? Randy swallowed, unsure what to say. Don't know, no, but I'll keep using it anyway if it makes you happy. He gave them a thumbs up with his punch-free hand. Randy had too much on his mind already to think about the idea of becoming about how the idea of becoming someone's housewife made him feel. There was a long pause afterwards. The funeral continued as normal. A few more people gave their condolences, their kind words and testimonies, but Randy found them all rather hard to listen to. He didn't know if it was guilt or boredom, or maybe some uncomfortable combination of the two, but he didn't really know how that would work. He'd never been emotionally intelligent, though. It was something his old middle school therapist said he needed to work on. The funeral hadn't been elaborate or particularly expensive, but that was okay. Nobody was expecting it to be. It was classy enough for what it was, a closed coffin surrounded by an assortment of flowers, all of them black, purple, or white. Randy didn't know many of the flowers by name, but he could appreciate the way they decorated what would otherwise be a rather drab venue. God, this was bleak. Randy had thought showing up would be a good thing. He could clear his conscience, make things right, all of that jazz. But it didn't actually feel good at all. Was he just rubbing it in? Was this the final curb stop after the kill? He couldn't say for certain. In an attempt to clear his head, he went for another swig of punch, realizing all too late that he'd already finished it. Great. Randall? A sweet, green voice interrupted Randy's train of thought, something he was grateful for. "Yes, dear?" "I miss my eggs." Randy sighed. "I know, darling. You told me already." "Because it's true! My poor babies are probably so lonely in their little dirt hovel. Frown." Kiki pouted. They kicked their feet into the ground like a cranky toddler. Randy, despite his internal murder-funeral angsting, giggled at their antics. He swore. Sometimes hanging out with Gigi felt like watching an alien and a newborn baby kitten pilot pilot a debatably human-shaped homunculus. "Well, we could always just visit sometime." "But Dick and Jerry's a big fucking meanie pants," Gigi huffed, hanging their head. "The fun fair's got rules and stuff. He didn't like it when I asked him to fence off my eggs so they didn't get eaten by panthers." Some cogs turned in Randy's head behind the Nokia screen. Before, in perhaps a moment of sad, pathetic man solidarity, he simply shrugged his shoulders. Not Jerry, but, like, if... An awkward little laugh, as he thrust out a hand perhaps too plainly in view of the other funeral goers, right towards the casket. "If something happened to the fun fair owner, you'd probably get in for free." The only person in Dialtown with the social ineptitude required to cackle at a joke like that proceeded to do so. "What, like, get more trash bags for him? Aren't those a precious resource? You live in a dumpster." In an act of phone God's mercy, Stabby and or Shooty had long since stepped away from the podium to talk with his grieving loved ones like a normal person. Kiki wasn't a monster. They knew the guy had emotions, probably, but they didn't look right with the rest of him. They didn't think the Weapon Brothers had the capacity to feel anything but, like, subpar villainous glee. PG-13 sadism, with some M-rated cuck jokes sprinkled in. You're meaning to tell them the funny knife guy had, like, a normal people life? Well, certainly not anymore. These kinds of things just didn't happen in Dialtown. Petty crime and bold-faced corruption the worst any of its residents had seen in a long, long time. Maybe it was mean of them, Randy, to laugh. But someone had to. Why wasn't anyone else? They had fun around here, right? This was the city with the weird-ass clown flyer on the telephone pole. What harm did a little body found and chopped up in a bunch of trash bags do? There was already, like, a dead raccoon in that phone booth. That one didn't get a funeral, and Phone Kiki had gotten so attached, too. Really, they thought, the strange cat-cat boom-man cat-cat who had been rattling on about elections during her piece on the victim had the right idea. What was with all the stuffy rules for events like this anyway? In Fogingi's non-existent eyes, the whole thing may as well have been on the same level as a kid's birthday party. In a sense, it was, they realized, when they noted the distant sight of little Billy kicking the poor, maybe widow, maybe only child, maybe some other thing, in the shins to get at his cup of complimentary funeral punch. Wait, why's little Billy here? Kiki chirped. Little sperm monster, planning on blackmailing the mourners out of their lunch monies, or what? Randy cringed. First of all, don't call anything, much less little Billy, a little sperm monster ever again. Is that how you talk about kids? Little Billy's no kid, Gigi said. He's more like an ancient force. You think any man, living or dead, could have ever raised that thing? He came into this world with the mountains and oceans. Phone God made light in the sky, and little Billy his arbiter of darkness and all things sad and miserable, I think. In thought, they swung their hands, after, of course, swallowing their complimentary funeral red Solo cup whole like a garbage compactor. I don't know why he's here. I don't think he cares, really. Randy picked at one of the buttons on his face, a habit that had to be entirely unconscious, given he didn't start screaming and throwing up about the idea of his head exploding. I think the mayor just babysits him, like bring your hellspawn to work day. Mayor? Gigi curled their fingers into a fist, looked around for a bit, then pointed at a random funeral goer. No, that's the guy who runs the auto shop. Oh, Gigi nodded, then perked their head around a little more before pointing at another person. Hun, if Stabby was the mayor, I'd have been freaking out a lot more. Randy wheezed good-naturedly. The scary Catwoman who was talking about elections? Oh! Again, Funky nodded their quite empty green head. They're both Urple and scary. That makes sense. Do mayors have to go to the funeral, like, every time someone dies? At that, Randy shrugged. Really, he didn't know why Mingus, now smoking a catnip cigarette over the casket and constantly looking over her shoulder to make sure no one noticed her trying to open it and pillage for any of the body's embalmed treasures, was even here. He figured she didn't even know half these residents' names. Until it came time to claim her universal approval ratings every election, she kept her citizens at a safe, visibly disgusted, paused length. Did she have any reason to care about what happened to Shooty? Did she have a debt to settle? Could the murder be pinned on some government mob extermination, and here she was to clear her image? None of those answers felt right. First of all, Dialtown's mayor didn't fight crime. She reveled in it. Nothing on the level of murder, but fraud, corruption, what have you, was a pretty open secret around the city. If there was a mob around in Dialtown, a really dangerous one, to anyone that wasn't Randy, who'd cry and piss himself at a squirrel skittering around his dumpster in the wee hours of the morning. If anything, they answered to Mayor Mingus. She had little Billy under her belt, after all. Truly nothing more terrifying. Wait. Fuck! Did he just kill a corrupt government official? Randy blanched at the thought, just as the Catwoman's ears perked up, mid-pillage, and murky green eyes zeroed in on him. Like a warning. Yet, as quickly as it came, the treacherous Molly flattened her fur, pocketed what seemed to be a watch, offered condolences and what looked to be a wad of cash, with her face printed on it, of course, to the grieving Stabby, and left the venue with little Billy in tow. Randy sweated into his bloody bandages. Of course this was his luck. The morning sun hit Randy like a ton of bricks. He didn't know what time it was or how long he'd been asleep for. All he could make out was the vague shape of Phone Gingy, peering down at him through the dumpster's newly opened lid. Babe, he muttered weakly, not awake enough to do anything but continue lying on the floor, his limbs bent at different, equally awkward angles, like he had spent the night before relentlessly tossing and turning before his body just shut down. Good morning, Angel! Gigi called out, tone suspiciously chipper. Randy squinted, rubbing where an eye would have been. Hi, what are you doing here? Gigi cocked their head to the side like a confused puppy. What do you mean? The sun burned far too intensely for a morning in February, and the birds chirped too loudly for Randy to think straight. He suspected they worked as a team to specifically make him miserable. It's early, hon. He didn't actually know what time it was. It could have been 3 in the afternoon already, and he'd be none the wiser. Oh, come on, Randy. Today's supposed to be special. You're being a real fucking doorknob right now. Special? Knowing Phone Gingy, that could be very, very dangerous. And Randy wasn't sure he had any more dangerous rendezvous left in him. Any more excitement or adventure might be bad for his already high blood pressure, you know? I'm not a doorknob, he pouted, more genuine emotion in his voice than what was probably appropriate. I don't know, Gingy teased, sticking out their long, blue, disgusting tongue. Sounds like something a little doorknob boy would say. Randy sighed. He doubted getting them to leave and going back to bed was an option at this point, no matter how much the cool floor of his dumpster beckoned him to take refuge from the hot afternoon sun. Though, maybe getting away from the garbage fumes for a while would be good for him, especially considering all the little spatterings of blood the possums missed when licking the place clean, something Randy didn't know they would actually do.
He rose slowly, stretching and popping his joints so loudly it would make a chiropractor clickbait channel blush. Kiki watched in anticipation, rapidly wagging their weird little tail stub back and forth. The minute Randy finished rising from the dumpster, like Rotary Christ on the third day, he was immediately greeted with a devious hug attack. Really more of a tackle, if we're being honest. There he is! How's my special little guy doing? What? Randy sputtered. Am I really your special little guy? Sure! I don't see why not. Randy seemed content with that answer. He'd never been someone's special little guy before. You know, Hud, you seem like you're in a good mood. Did something happen? Gigi lit up. Don't act like you don't know. We have a very special day ahead of us, Randall. Look, I'm sure whatever you have planned will be fun and all, but I'm really not feeling good, and I didn't sleep very well, and Randy was suddenly shushed very loudly, and maybe if he were more conscious it would have made him mad, but as it stood, he didn't feel much of anything besides a burning desire for post-morning nap time. Well, you know what helps me when I don't feel good? A horrifying question. Randy simply nodded his head. Horngiki then pulled a bottle of cough syrup from what Randy could only assume was from the ether. Considering how they almost never wore clothes, and he did not want to consider any other alternatives. What? Randy, all Gingles here is never right without their cough nectar. I don't like sharing, but it looks like you need it if we're going to go on our adventure. Randy looked at the bottle in horror. Hun, I really don't think that's gonna help. You will drink your cough nectar and feel better. Fine, fuck it. Who gave a shit anymore? Okay, Randy said, radiating submissive pheromones. He lazily opened the lid and put the bottle to his weird phone-eating slot, downing a good chunk of it with a suspicious amount of ease. Here went nothing.
Okay, quick liquid break. I love my mug, root beer. Gotta wet the whistle. So nasty looking. Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Chapter 3. Nothing more than an unpredictable danger. Holy shit, was that Olive Garden? Squinting up at the sign, through a blurred, cough nectar-induced haze, Randy didn't know what to say. Good for him, though. He didn't have to say anything, as Funkiki tugged him along by the hood of his jacket, in the same way one would drag a misbehaving cat around by the scruff. His feet didn't land in the right places. Oh, sweet phone god, he was going to explode all over Olive Garden's tiles. Oh, this wasn't good. This kind of fucking sucked, in fact. Why did he agree to one of Phone Gingy's bright ideas again? Now he couldn't place it, and all that mattered was that he was spending this god-awful February afternoon at Olive Garden with Dialtown's local cryptid, who would probably start eating the place like a fucking termite. First of all, he wasn't dressed in the least to go to an actual restaurant, and by phone god, neither was Gingy. At least they didn't have the tassels on. Groaning like he was seasick, the duo somehow managed to fumble their way into the restaurant's entrance, where... They didn't need to pay. Gigi was pulling him over to a table. Holy shit, this was a reserved event. Holy shit! It was his fucking birthday, and he was spending it with Phone Gigi's friends at fucking Olive Garden! Yeah, sure enough, there was Oliver, who, though we'd known the guy for quite some time now, Felt like more of Gigi's friend than his, considering everything that was wrong with his brain was also wrong with theirs. There was lady from the bank he couldn't recall in his nectar haze, but he knew the look of her. There was Bigfoot. Okay, fine. There was Bigfoot, with a neatly folded napkin and everything, tucked beneath his camera like a bib, looking comically large in his chair, whole 9 yards. At Randy's Olive Garden birthday party. Sure. Fine. Okay. Wavering in and out of lucidity as Funky grappled at, hugged, and variously annoyed each friend piece by piece, Randy was beginning to wish he'd just been arrested by this point. Hey, hey, hey! If it isn't Randy Bodandy! Randy was momentarily drawn back to reality by the calling of his name. It was Oliver. Even if his head was pounding and his vision swam, he recognized the tone of the voice instantly, because who the hell else talked like that? Hey, Randy replied after a moment of delay. God, he probably looked like a fucking moron. Who said hey like that? Oh God, everyone here probably knew he was high as balls. They could smell it. Come on, Randy. Keep it cool. Lunch will only be an hour or two, and then you go home and sleep for 1,000,000 years. It's fine. You can do it. Sit down and order something. Don't be weird. Don't be like weird. For the love of God, don't be weird. Don't be weird. Randy? A second voice chimed in, more firm in its tone. Are you okay? You've been standing at the table for over a minute now. That was the bank woman, probably. Probably. His vision was getting so blurry it was kinda hard to tell. Oh, sorry, I'm just... Come on, Randy, think. Think, you're being weird. You're being weird! I'm just really tired is all. I didn't sleep well. Technically none of that was a lie, which he considered a victory of some sort. He managed to sit down at the booth, though he wasn't coherent enough to make out anything on the menu. The text all bled into each other like a doctor's note written in Sharpie. But that was fine, right? It was Olive Garden. Pasta! Nothing that complicated. Don't mind him, Kinky assured the other patrons. He's just really nervous about Olive Garden, 'cause it's fancy. They gave him a pat on the back, which almost made him vomit right then and there at the table. Randy here isn't used to fancy living. The cold streets are all he knows. Sweet rotary Jesus, I'm so bad at being high. I'm going to fucking die here. I'm going to fucking die at this Olive Garden, and they'll figure out I killed that guy, and his family's going to cry so hard because the guy who murdered their son was so cringe that all he'll ever be known for is the guy who got murdered by the guy who died at Olive Garden like a week later. They're going to want my head on a pike. They're going to immortalize my grave as one that people go to pee on because I'll be hated as much as phone would ring in because I'll be the Olive Garden murderer. My dad is going to be so disappointed and sad that I died so fucking pathetically in an Olive Garden after accidentally killing a government official in the most cringe flop way imaginable, and my friends will hate me, and my dad will be so sad that he can't work, and then he gets fired and he loses his house, and then he has to sleep in a dumpster, and his other kids stop talking to him, and then he dies alone in an Olive Garden too, in a symbolic gesture of hatred for the son who took his life from him, and I'll be a never-ending possible blight upon my bloodline, and one day they'll smash my gravestone with a wrecking ball and put it in another fucking Olive Garden there because they hate me and my pathetic life that much. Sure you alright, bucko? Oliver asked. Randy gesticulated. Never-ending pasta bowl. Bigfoot politely grunted in agreement from across the table. The woman glanced over at Randy in the same manner one might look at a dying rabid fox on the side of the road. She had the sort of look about her that screamed, God, I really took a half-day off for this? Never-ending pasta bowl? She repeated, clearly confused. He didn't even mean to say that out loud. Good God, he was going to shrivel up into a raisin. Karen, I'm sure he's just pondering the many gnarly delights this establishment has to offer. Oliver answered in Randy's place. Karen. That was her name. Randy tried his best to remember it to aid him on his quest of faking sobriety, but he knew deep down it was a lost cause. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a poor, unsuspecting waitress, innocent and still young, asking everyone what they wanted to drink, seemingly unfazed by the presence of Bigfoot. Maybe he was a regular at Olive Garden. Randy didn't fucking know. Slowly, painfully, Randy blinked, with both of his non-existent eyelids going, hopefully, at the same pace, speed, and direction. Drink. Yes, people had drinks at Olive Garden, didn't they? The Nokia mumbled, head pounding, feeling like it was about to explode even more than usual. Already, a syllable was pushing its way from him, like a baby, still in its amniotic sac, being expelled from a mother's uterus, with just as much pain, groaning, and fluid. He hadn't even noticed the bank lady had already begun to open her mouth to ask for a lemonade like a normal fucking person. Gummy and feeble, Randy managed to spurt out his bloody, slickened, verbal placenta. Coca-Cola. The waitress paused. She was a cute little thing, hands politely clasped, pleasant little apron that made her look like a pilgrim, with even a digital cash register mounted atop her shoulders. In the span of half a second, Randy gazed at her, imagining perhaps a young girl at her first job, oblivious to the world's cruel proclivities, having perhaps a pet or two at home, little sneakers to tie. God, she had no experience. She didn't know what she was asking for the moment she approached this fateful Olive Garden table. Her screen buffered a little in thought before she quaintly responded, "Oh, I'm sorry. We're out. Is Hepsi okay?" Is. Randy sweated through every orifice one could sweat through. What if he was allergic to Hepsi? What if someone at the table was? And they would die forever. For a moment, the part of Randy's brain that hadn't been dislodged by that damn fortune-telling machine or the ensuing rock raised its symbolically unbandaged hands and assured, no, if someone had a problem with Hepsi, they would say something. Gay's friends are all smart people. Oliver at least can handle a Hepsi. Horrid fountain drinks are his favorite. At which point the louder, and at this point bigger, part of Randy's brain, the one that reacted to any degree of interaction with another human being like he was trying to recall Boy Scout lectures on how to flee from an approaching mountain lion, replied, "Okay, but what if the bank lady's parents were killed by a bottle of Hepsi, and everyone knows, and they're all thinking I'm so fucking mean for even prodding Hepsi's name into being spoken in her presence?" The rational part of his brain said nothing to that. Perhaps too baffled by his stupidity to justify it with a response. Or perhaps he was right all along, and that was why. He could feel the wetness of each individual layer of his skin. "No, Hepsi," he spoke, feeble and light. "No, actually just some water. It's fine, actually, thank you." The waitress nodded, no doubt hiding future decades of psychological intervention behind the buttons of her cash register. "And you?" she asked Ginky, leaning down a little like she was dressing a baby in a high chair. Happily, the cryptid drummed their fingers and whirred, "I want a Hepsi!" Randy felt like he was going to die. "Karen," Oliver addressed the bank woman, "you're a woman of fine taste and culture, right?" Karen seemed taken aback by this, shifting slightly. "Not particularly. I guess it depends, though I'm not sure what about the Olive Garden drink menu would prompt such a question." "I was just thinking you look like someone who knows her wines and other elixirs." Karen didn't know if he meant that in a cultural arts way or a you look like you're depressed and drink a lot way. The second option probably should have been offensive to her, but it was more accurate. She sighed. "I indulge from time to time." Oliver took that as an excuse to scoot closer to her. She winced, not really liking close physical contact, but she liked him enough that she didn't say anything. Yet. He lifted his menu towards her. "Well, I'm torn between getting some delicious and refreshing helping of Hepsi for myself, or getting a fancy little drink to pair with my chicken and shrimp carbonara, made in-house with sautéed seasoned chicken, shrimp and spaghetti tossed in a creamy sauce with bacon and roasted red peppers."
Karen didn't have advanced wine knowledge, but her common sense told her that the selection at Olive Garden probably wasn't worth the $20 a bottle they were charging. But before she could relay this, she looked back at Randy, who appeared to be mid-stroke, and changed her mind. Wine's a good idea, yeah. Groovy, groovy. Moscato Primo Amore or red Roscato Rosso Dolce, whichever has more alcohol. Then Bigfoot grunted to remind everyone of his presence. It was universally understood he was asking for a Bellini peach raspberry iced tea. The waitress nodded, jotting the drink orders down on her quaint little notepad. And will we like any appetizers today? Randy Newley threw up his cough nectar all over the Olive Garden table. Appetizers? Were drinks not enough? Was it ever fucking enough? He didn't even think to look at the appetizers menu. When Randy was a small boy, about 3 apples high, there hadn't been time for appetizers. Randy's father was a no-nonsense man. There was no time for appetizers, no time for anything good in this cruel world. He'd never ordered appetizers at a restaurant before. Nary an onion ring or mozzarella stick had ever known the inside of his Callum Crown patented eating slot. What in phone God's name was a stuffed ziti fritta? God, no. He wanted to plead through the organic haze of his cough nectar-induced delirium. No appetizers. Get me out of here. Oh God, oh fuck. Oliver's talking to the bank lady probably about how much of a creep I am and how I totally smell like a murderer high out of his mind right now. Meatballs! Phone Gingy cheered, like it was their birthday and not Randy's. I love balls! I love balls! I love Please stop banging on the table. You are going to aggravate Bigfoot, Karen hissed, just in time for the ape-man's ape fist to join Gingy's in delighted pounding against the poor unsuspecting Olive Garden table. Out of social rule, Randy's gaze fell upon the appetizer menu, comprehending none of it. All a blur of pasta and meat and bread and probably other things. Yellow and brown and Italian spice green and blood fucking red! Shooty and or stabby blood red! He was going to die here. That Randy was sure of. He'd spent his birthday convulsing in an Olive Garden in a way so undoubtedly pathetic that it became immediately apparent to everyone present in the eating establishment that he was a very suspicious man with manners of red sauce on his hands. And, Gigi started, eager to either speak for or further humiliate the man who was beginning to question ever calling himself their lover. Meatballs, pretty please, for my birthday schnookums here, too. In a pre-practiced, training video-honed customer service voice, the waitress beamed. Oh, it's your birthday? I am going to wring that cryptid green fuck's throat with my own 2 hands next for doing this to me. I will need multiple trash bags for the entire length of their disgusting tongue. This Olive Garden event will be the last place Phone Gingles Gingy will have ever been seen alive in public. Whatever creature they slithered out of that they can call a family will only see them again on the fucking news. A very high, very upset Randy thought. Yeah. A very high, very upset Randy managed to squeak aloud. Yeah, it's my birthday. Thanks for reminding them, hon. Thanks a lot. Please don't bring out the waiters. The shivering, blood and red sauce sick Randy was able to think, if nothing else, as the waitress disappeared into the ether of Olive Garden. Please, please, I will bet all the remaining luck in my life on this. I am begging to you, phone god. Please, for once, just let my wretched prayers be answered. Please. When the staff emerged with a cake, inspiring Gingy to start delightedly kicking beneath the table, and in one wretched exhale, like the sky changing color before a tornado, like sirens before the bombs dropped, Karen's hands pressed at either side of her head, doing little to quell the oncoming storm, they opened their mouths to sing. It was here, Randy realized. God didn't hate him. No, God wasn't even real. Not in this Olive Garden. You couldn't pin tragedy on the uncaring tides of the universe, on solar flares a million miles up into the galaxy. The world did not hate Randy Jade. Its people did. Randy had no say in what he did next. Like a marionette, the strings controlling him pulled his arms up and slammed them against the Italian-American table. Please excuse me, I need to use the bathroom, I'll be right back. Before anyone could say anything, he sprinted off from the table, running into the restaurant's walkway much like a frightened gazelle, bolting into the vast savannah, desperate to stay alive. He quickly remembered he didn't know where anything in this Olive Garden was, and ran back to the table, still sprinting in place. Hey, I'm so sorry, I don't know where the bathroom is, I'm so fucking sorry. The Olive Garden birthday team looked at him, their hearts full of confusion and pity, but mostly confusion. The waitress who took their drink order spoke up, her customer service voice breaking slightly. It's down the hall and to the left. Are you okay, sweetheart? Oh, phone God, she's on to him! I'm great, I'm so fucking great and normal, okay, thank you, goodbye. And like that, he was gone into the night. Everyone left at the table could hear him audibly trip, scream, fall, get up, continue running to the bathroom, and slam the door. His friends were stunned, because what the fuck was that? Ginky, Karen interjected, breaking the momentary silence, hand rubbing her temple. What happened before the two of you got here? Ginky folded their hands beneath their chin, feigning innocence. Whatever do you mean, Ubu? I'm just a little creature. I would never do anything nefarious. Karen slammed her fist on the table. Unlike before, there was no promise of meatballs, nor glee at their presence. Genki! Come on! I'm sure things are as groovy as ever. Randy is just, kinda like that sometimes. Oliver reasoned. He could tell something was off as much as everyone else, but he was desperate to have a nice, gnarly day filled with friendship and Italian cuisine. Bigfoot sadly grunted. Phone Geeky, I swear to God, I gave Randy some of my cough syrup, cough nectar, yeah. Sorry. Karen sighed really, really loudly. Dude, Geeky, not cool. We've talked about this. Oliver looked back at them disappointedly, which hurt significantly more coming from him than Karen. Karen they were used to disappointing. They looked down at the table in shame, like a newborn little itty-bitty baby puppy caught chewing a doorframe or perhaps a pair of dress shoes. Sorry, I'm sorry. I feel so bad. He was just so nervous about all the nefarious crimes and murders happening lately. A technically true statement. Whoa! Oliver shifted tones, intrigued. Nefarious crimes and murders? Say more right now. He took the cap off his fancy wine, drinking it straight from the bottle. Karen, still sitting next to him, didn't know why she expected better. You know, guy from the mob exploded into giblets and blood and giblets. Now he's all on edge because what if he explodes into giblets next? Everyone at the table seemed to understand this. Randy was the kind of guy who would be paranoid about turning into giblets in his day-to-day life. And, in complete fairness, this behavior was, while strange, not wholly out of character for him. Oddities explained, most, by the copious amounts of cough nectar he'd supposedly consumed. Should we? Karen began, somewhere between uneased and concerned, whether in a worried way or a scared way, Funky couldn't place. I don't know. Take him home? He seems... She trailed off, right on cue for a Randy-shaped crash to come from somewhere in the general direction of Olive Garden's back rooms. Volatile. I sure wouldn't want to be losing my mind in a place like this, after a surprise party, no less. After saying her piece, the printer sighed, seeming to nurse a headache already. Oliver spared no such restraint, a bottle of wine under his arm like a football, or perhaps swaddled like a newborn, with no intention of getting up out of his chair. Not for Randy or anyone else, or anything else. What about the murders, bro? I was at the funeral, but it was totally lame. Kiki hung their head. Didn't even have any snacks there, and we couldn't even look in the coffin. Isn't that like the funnest part of someone dying? Reaching over Oliver's shoulder for the bottle, Karen stated rather, "You were hoping to devour that man's body, weren't you?" What? No! God, Karen, I have standards, Fungiki snapped. I had to tell Randy about this too. Just 'cause you eat roadkill, suddenly you're all about eating man parts? No! Gosh, no! I mean, thought about it a little, but no! Too much meat and viscera for this creature. The asphalt gives it a nice smoky flavor, too. I'm not just gonna eat any man body I find lying around. Oliver pondered this. So, would you eat a man body if it was small and or thin enough? And if it had been hit by a car? Karen groaned, giving Fungiki no chance to start their odd lecture on the matter. She had more than enough of them in small doses, and this was certifiably a very large dose, even without their incessant ramblings on anthropophagia. I'm stopping this conversation before I can start. Kinky was pleased enough to bounce between eating meatballs out of their own hand like both a wild horse and the little girl taming it, and chewing up the appetizers to spit into Bigfoot's eating slot to feed him like a baby bird. Even when everyone at the table knew Bigfoot was plenty capable of using silverware like a good ape-man. Perhaps it was a show of the bond Dialtown's two cryptids shared. Regardless, Karen was pointedly staring down at her dinner, lemonade precariously placed between her line of sight to Fungingi, so if she had to see any of that, at least it would be warped by the glass. It's the little things. Only when it became apparent to everyone present how pathetic it was to have a birthday dinner at Olive Garden with the birthday winner in question being completely absent did they perk up at the distant sound of a crash. Foreheads turned, and there, visible through the window pane, was Randy Jade himself, scampering through the parking lot like he was running from a wild chimpanzee. His legs and arms whirled and flailed, the sight almost beautiful in its absurdity, until he rammed face first into the driver's side door of a blue sedan and promptly fell unconscious. End of part 1.